right, Jay, it is another special episode with Jenny Smythe, and what an interesting person, what a wonderful story she has, and I wasn't there, and I'm so bummed. I've listened to it. It's a fantastic interview, and what a wonderful person.
Yeah, she is a force of nature. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like if she lived closer, we'd be having coffee and solving all the music industry's problems over a cappuccino. But she's the president and CEO of Girlilla Marketing. She's got this new book we talk about called Becoming Girlilla. Fantastic book. I rarely read a book twice, but I may read this one again. It was just very inspiring. She talks about her personal journey, and she gives some reflections and advice, and she talks about women in the music industry and overcoming adversity, with cancer and the struggle she had with her father. It was just a fantastic conversation. So without further ado, here's Jenny Smythe, a special episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
I did read your book, and I really enjoyed it. There were on so many different levels, and we can definitely dig into that. But we have a lot of similarities in our path, and I think the underlying thing for me is I love that you've overcome adversity, and all of my closest friends have that in common. Not by design, but the subtitle could be the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah. Amen.
And I just, huge kudos for that. But I want to kick it off because...
And to you, by the way. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do any of this business stuff that we all do together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start with sort of how you kick off the book, because I thought it was really powerful about, your father asked you as he was fighting cancer. The quote was, if you knew your life was half over, what would you do? Talk about that story a little bit, because I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a passing moment, it wasn't, and my dad and I didn't have the kind of relationship. We would never have deep conversations. Like, we would talk about the weather, we would talk about the market, we would talk about the Denver Broncos, whatever. We weren't, and the older I got, the deeper it did get, but it was more of a friendship, as adults. But he still was my dad. And so at the end of the day, when you see somebody suffering from something like pancreatic cancer, you are very aware that every conversation could be the last, and he was having these moments of lucidity, and then he would just kind of, go back to sleep. And so I never really knew. I was just kind of in the hospital room, had my gigantic Dell computer, which at the time, was like what we had to have when we worked at Clear Channel, which is a whole nother podcast. And I was fighting to find time to work and to also talk to the insurance companies. And, it was a lot. And, usually when he would kind of pop out of bed, it was something simple like, can you get me some ice? Or, and he would have moments where like he would say things that just didn't really make sense, So he popped out of bed and he was just kind of like, hey, what would you do if you knew your life was half over? And I was like, what kind of question is that? Like, that is like, I don't know. I don't know, Pete. And then I was like, it's good, just go back to bed. It's going to be fine. But then it really sunk in, and it sunk in on me like somebody sat on my chest. And I was a moment in time where I was told by whatever I was going to answer that question. And so I've verbalized for the first time ever a couple of things that I wanted to accomplish. And I don't even remember if he was awake when I answered him. And it didn't matter because it was like a very ethereal experience. And it was verbalizing it, and it was so simple in the answer. And up until that moment, for years, it was very complicated. It was required perfect timing and the perfect financial situation and the perfect personal situation, and all the risks and versus possible benefits. Like, they were all lopsided in the wrong direction until that one moment. And so that is what happened in that hospital room.
I mean, what a powerful, powerful thing.
Insane. And like, if anybody else had told me that story, I would have said that is an absolute divine intervention. That is, and it doesn't matter what you believe in, that is like literally a gift, and you must move on that. And so I, for once, listened to myself. And so that's where it came from. So I always think, for all the things my dad didn't do that I could have been very angry, that is what I remember about him. And so that is why I'm able to be so grateful.
And I think it's something that you can share with other people. And it really hit me hard when I read that. And it reminded me a little bit of this page of a book by Bridget Hilton, where she has like 78 blocks on this page. And she says that, and I'm going to paraphrase this, that the average lifespan in the US is 78. It's a little more for females, a little less for males, but roughly around 78. There's 78 blocks on that page. And she encourages you to color in up to your age. I only got a handful of blocks left. And what that story taught me, and what your story taught me, is that you don't have time for toxic relationships, toxic jobs. You need to find what lights you up and hit that shit hard.
Yep. And I feel like that conversation happened right before my 30th birthday. Okay. So he was 67 when he died. So, I mean, you could definitely see, but now I'm 48. And so I think about that question almost every single year, because he happened to pass away on my birthday. So I think about that every single birthday. Honestly, again, it's like the gift that keeps on giving, because if there is something that I'm putting off or waiting for, again, the perfect scenario, and it even applied to me deciding to have children. I did all of that backwards too. And, it's not, and it worked out, like, because everything works out, like, we just have to be open to it.
In the book, you write, who you know is often more important than what you know. Amen. But everybody I've met in the music industry has a short list of people that they claim are instrumental in their career, that gave them advice or opened a door for them. And if you would ask the people on their list, they'd say, oh no, Jenny did that all on her own. I just, gave her a tip or gave her a phone number or whatever. But who are some of those names on your list? People who you look back on and go, wow, that was meaningful for me. And that was a door that was opened because of these people.
That's an easy question for me. Lindy Thurman at Elektra Entertainment. First and only woman I've ever actually had the privilege of working for. and there's so many in between, but like there were so many lessons by proxy of being around these huge characters of people that like maybe taught me what not to do, also very important. Like AKA the 90s, right? But Jay Frank, 100% like up there in terms of, seeing something in me that wasn't polished and helping me uncover that. As painful as that probably was for him. But I do think he would take credit for it. And we would have a good laugh about it, for sure. But in terms of like the person that was most instrumental in my professional development, it was definitely Jay. And then later on, as a business owner and for people that have just taught me, about the nonprofit space, about, business management, how to just be a better person in business. Joe Galante, Sarah Trahern, and Tiffany Kearns, all Nashville-based businesses, and business people, but truly just, and every year it feels like somebody comes into my life that I was like, how did I ever live without this person? And I equally, for my team, the people that I work with every single day, I learn as much from them, as I think they learn from me. So it is a constant, a constant text chain, a constant, let me call somebody. And I think at this point in my life, what I think is the most luckiest, since you use that word, is that like any problem that comes up, there's a person that I could be like, I can call so and so, and they can teach me how to get through this, or maybe they can offer me some advice or a way of thinking about this that maybe I wouldn't on my own.
I want to talk to you about your business being female-led. I'm a father of 2 daughters. I have a sister. I'm very pro-woman, and I want to talk about the negative and the positive. On the positive side, I remember my youngest daughter was a sprinter. She made it to the Junior Olympics. And the reason I bring that up is because the boys in the neighborhood, one time she overheard them saying, "Oh, you run like a girl." And my daughter said, "You wish you ran like a girl."
That's right.
Right? And I want to talk about the pros and cons. And let's talk about the pros, because you work with a team made up primarily of women, correct?
All women. Mm-hmm.
And that's by design.
In the beginning, yes. And then in the middle, I tried. And now I'm double down on where I'm at. So I did not explicitly set out, like when I created Girlilla, I was thinking of myself. Even the logo was like myself, and I was sort of guerrilla warfare. Obviously, it was meant to be boots on the ground, digital marketing at the time, very underground, grassrooty type of business. And then I knew I was going to hire another woman for sure. And then it was another one. And then it was another one, because I kept hiring the most talented people that applied. And we did try, we've opened it up. We've always been open to applications and interest, but over the years, I can count on one hand how many men have applied. And so we've tried a couple of things, and it just hasn't worked out. And I don't think that has anything to do with either sex. It just is almost it's just a vibe, And for me, for what we do, this, us, the kids that started in new media, a lot of us were women from the very beginning. When I think about the people that were at the head of like the companies at the time when I was coming up, and people were very confused about, is new media IT, like, can we fix your computer? Like, there's like very awful, very painful growth periods there. But now I'm like so overwhelmed with talent that I wish I could have, 1,000-person firm that I could employ even more. But I can't because it's relative. It's like how many clients you have versus how many employees you have. So, but I think my biggest flex is the retention. In a place and time where digital marketing and digital marketers are in high demand. I feel very lucky to have the team that I have now that has been here for a really long time. And when they could make more money and they could go do other things and they choose to be here every day, like as an employer, that means something to me. It is familial.
Yeah. Now let's look at the negative side of it. I interviewed a prominent music industry attorney recently, and she told me the story about when you cook lobsters and you put them in a pot. You may have heard this, that if you're cooking male lobsters, you do need a lid on the pot because they will help each other out of the pot. And if you're cooking female lobsters, as the story goes, you don't need a lid on the pot because they drag each other back down.
Oh my God.
I don't know if that's true in what you've experienced, but I know that Nashville has had a reputation in years past of being sort of a boys' club, especially on the radio side. But it seems like there's a change afoot, whether it's Lainey Wilson or Mickey Guyton or, my friend Cameo Carlson over at, M Theory, or there are a lot of strong women in Nashville that are making waves in all different aspects, whether it's recording, producing, engineering, labels, distribution, all of that. Are you finding that it's progressing? Oh,
I think I wouldn't have moved here and started my business here if I didn't think it was ripe. And I think that progression happens over time, but for me, it was the place of the most impact. And I think that we don't necessarily have a progression issue. We have a credit issue. Like we have, a situation here where you're always sort of talked about, like there's a politeness to being quietly successful for years and years without the mainstream media paying attention to you. And so there is a little bit of a like, well, how do we take a lap without seeming gratuitous, I guess, but I hear what you're saying. And I think that a lot of the coverage of the unfairness was happening from the outside in instead of the inside. But I do think progress was happening. And I certainly am a benefactor of the progress, but I also believe that I build bridges as well.
Yeah, let's talk about some parts of the book. One part I thought was really interesting is about identity and self-discovery. Do you think that identity is something we build or something we uncover?
That's a really good question. I feel like it is there and you do have to uncover it, but at a certain point, you do have to decide you're going to build on who you are. And I think that's hard for us. And I think we go through it several times. Like again, at 48 years old, I've been just a single person who just cared about, sort of being at the top of a professional game. And then I'm also, failed marriage. And, then I'm a cancer patient and I'm a wife and I'm a mom and I like to rescue dogs and, like all of these things that have to be uncovered, but they also need attention to be built. And so how do you decide, what you're going to invest in is really quite difficult the older you get, especially after you have children, because there are only so many hours in the day. And so my initial gut instinct is to take on all the things. And I realized not until I was like really into my 40s that I wasn't doing I wasn't doing a good service to the things that I really wanted to be a part of if I was only giving what I could when I could. So you do have to make choices on like, what are you going to put your time and energy into? And then sometimes, like, you find that you're not as passionate about something that you were maybe 10 years ago. And I see that a lot for people in our business. And I hate that for them because it's just too damn hard unless you're like extremely passionate about doing it every day. But I think it's kind of both.
Yeah, we talk about overcoming adversity, and you just mentioned your battle with cancer, and it was just heartbreaking reading that in the book. Talk a little bit about how you found out and what that journey was like.
Oh man, I mean, I am the poster child for early detection. I went in at 40. I was fine. My first mammogram, like I was supposed to at 40, it was fine. And then I went in at 41 and I was not fine. And there's just nothing that prepares you for that phone call from your doctor saying that you have cancer. Like I don't even have the words, like the trauma of hearing something like that and all the flooding thoughts that come your way in those next few days are so dark. And for me, because I really only had my father's experience, first of all, later on I found out I don't have the gene. I don't really have a family history of it. I mean, most people have breast cancer, but it wasn't diagnosed, or it was a complicated, there were one or two morbidities that people were dealing with later on in life. And we just didn't have the type of diagnostics that we have now. So there was a moment where I was just like, why me? Like literally, what the fuck? Like, I am doing everything I can, in terms of my health. I have two small children. I run a business. I think I'm an okay person. Like, why was you go through that self-pity questioning, you ask, what, you do the whole thing. And then you realize, why not me? Because it is so fucked up and random that why wouldn't it be me? And so you have to accept that, and you get stronger, in your ability to understand the statistics. Like, they aren't just like a pink poster on a wall that says 1 in 8 women, which, by the way, as I'm sitting here talking to you, is closer to 1 in 7 now, which is supremely depressing. I don't know why I got it. And I'm never going to be the kind of person that is like, oh, it made me a better person. I am never going to feel that way. I'm never going to be grateful for it, but I am going to use everything that I've ever gone through and everything I know to do what I can to help to make sure that somebody else doesn't go through it, including your daughters and my daughter.
Yeah.
And your wife. And I am confident in my lifetime that we will see a vaccine. I am. But it is unequivocally the most rageful reaction for me when I hear somebody say that they have access to and haven't gotten their mammogram. Don't send them my way, because if you have access and you have insurance and you aren't getting that mammogram because you're afraid of radiation or whatever other bullshit thing that you've heard, I will tell you this right now, I didn't even say this in the book. My cancer was in the middle of my boob. So I would have never felt it. And if I would have waited 1 more year, I would not be here.
Yeah. You wouldn't have found it with a self-check. It only came about with that mammogram.
That's right. So if I would have skipped a year, or maybe I would have gone in 6 more months because I got around to it because I was busy. So anything you can do to encourage your your loved ones, to just keep that on the calendar once a year. It's so treatable if you catch it in the beginning. And not everybody has to go through what I went through. There's so many, I don't want to say lighter cases, but there are lighter treatments for cancer that is caught earlier, and it's getting better and faster. So there's just nothing to be afraid of. What you should be afraid of is not getting the test.
Great advice. You also talk about mental health throughout the book. You discuss anxiety, ADHD, self-criticism, and you do it with really raw honesty. What role do you think does vulnerability play in empowerment for you?
I think I'm the classic case of the girl who tried to talk to her family about how she was feeling, and the family was like, we don't talk about those things, and you need to be stronger, and you just need to, whatever. I thank God the fact that I was, in the music business and around, as I lovingly refer to all of us as a total bunch of weirdos, right? But there's something uniquely profound about being surrounded by equal parts artist and business, because you have the sensitivities on one side where people are articulating things that you can't put into words yourself, and they're putting them into 2-minute, 3-minute, little snippets that encapsulate everything that you're going through, maybe an entire generation, right? And then you have the business people that have access to health insurance and, all of these things. And then I am of the age of, came up in the Prozac Nation, right? So this was all, before Prozac Nation, and this isn't factual, this is just my opinion, before something like Prozac Nation, which happened to be a person that was in the music business, when you thought of mental illness, the images that came up were people being locked away in straitjackets, being put on lithium, which, I talk about in the book. So we'll get there in a minute. But to now understanding that mental health requires, as much working out as we do for our bodies, and what we eat and what we consume, and, all of those things, and that there are situational issues that pop up that we can't just will ourselves out of, Yeah. And so I think that what's nice about all of the things happening now, kind of like cancer, in a way, it's like it's going to affect you at some point in your life in mental health, whether it comes in the form of grief or actual depression or anxiety or whatever, the 100 different ways that it can affect you. But the chances are, if you're a human being on planet Earth, you will struggle with something. And so being able to say, hey, I actually struggled with this in my 20s, and then I struggled with this postpartum, and then I struggled with this during cancer treatment, allows people to, I think, see that there's hope. And when I think about those darkest hours of being diagnosed, I really tried to stay off the internet because I know better. But I read those stories of those celebrities who shared their stories of survivorship early on, and I'm so grateful that they shared their stories. And so when I chose to talk about my own mental health, I just thought maybe somebody will find this online in a dark hour and think to themselves, this is normal.
Yeah.
Like, this is normal to go through something like this. And it's just something I need to call my doctor about, and something I need to talk to my friends and my loved ones about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what your writing does is it helps to sort of dissolve those stigmas that are maybe attached to admitting that you have these challenges.
Yeah. And even though I got misdiagnosed, and that was pretty traumatic to go through that, not to mention to be put on a pretty, life-changing chemical alteration. I remember having a conversation with my mom, who's like 50, she's a 1950s mom. And her reaction was basically like, don't tell anybody. Like, oh my God, what are people gonna think? And I was like, well, I mean, I already think a bunch of stuff. I'm like, I'm already a dropout. I work in the music business, like I could list off a plethora of reasons that the neighbors might be pearl clutching too. But in this case, being in our business surrounded by artists and being around drug and alcohol abuse and all of these things that are all really mental health issues at the end of the day. And so I am really happy when I see young people say things out loud like, I just got to take a break, I think, or I feel overstimulated, or I got to take a walk, or, I'm going to take some time to think about this feeling, and I know Gen Z gets a bunch of shit from people, but I think I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. You write about giving your inner child compassion. What does healing look like for you, and how has that sort of evolved for you?
I think I'm still working on it. I think I am still gonna just be an overachiever till the day I die, but I also don't miss softball games. So I do my part. I try to, cut my phone off at a certain hour if I can. But I still fight with, of course, wanting to take on everything, but I really am still very happy about what I do. And so I was telling somebody this the other day, like they always talk about life work balance and, you got to turn this off to be this person. And I always thought that was super unhealthy. For me, what I do is who I am. And so when I actually embraced that, and said, these are one and the same. I'm not a different person at work than I am at my house, good or bad. Probably the biggest fight that I ever have with my husband is because we both run our own businesses, So it's like, if I come home, he's like, hey, I don't work for you. I was like, cool, I don't work for you either, like, just so you know. But those are really the only riffs.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people that I know, and it could be a blessing and a curse. You only have one speed.
Yeah.
Right. There's a recurring theme, making something out of nothing. What does creativity mean to you in sort of a world that's obsessed with productivity?
Oh my God, I could talk to you for an hour about this. In my office, we call it being busy with no result. Our world, digital marketing, is open to so much interpretation because all of the data is fairly public. Follower count, stream numbers, video plays, like all of that. And so the idea that success is only based within one data set is something that we spend a lot of time breaking down for people. But for me, I just feel like you can busy yourself as a marketing person for 12 hours a day doing nothing that matters. And so my job is to keep everybody on track on that front. Like, there is just no winning if there's not we all have to agree with what that win looks like before we start. Otherwise, it just becomes like a number that somebody, not me, that somebody has decided is like the number that makes you successful. So, it's a little bit of deprogramming, which is ironic. That's coming from your digital marketing team, but that's what we have to do, especially for artists. Like, it's just not conducive to the creative process.
If you could go back in time and talk to your younger self before you really move forward in business, what advice would you give her?
I would tell her not to make so many lateral moves. I took several jobs that were just either I was just impatient. And but then I also think, they introduced me to other people that gave me other lessons. And so, the running joke for me was like for about 10 years of my career, I had 10 jobs, but on paper it looked super impressive so long as you didn't look at the dates. And at some point, me not working out in all of those jobs, it dawned on me that it might be me, like it might not just be everybody else. Um, so I have come to terms with that. I have come to terms that I was always meant to probably be an entrepreneur, and it doesn't matter how amazing the company was or how much money I got paid or how great my bosses were or what kind of perks I had. It didn't matter. It just was not going to be the thing that I built. It was always going to be the thing that somebody else built.
The business has changed so much in just the last few years, let alone since you started. How do you face those challenges with your team of, there's so much noise out there. I mean, the barrier to entry is gone. You and I could record something this afternoon and get it up on DSPs in no time. There's so much noise out there. How do you find an audience, engage an audience, grow an audience today versus, 5 years ago?
I mean, that's the $1 million question. But the thing is like, I can't remember a time where things, especially in our business, weren't changing drastically every 5 years. I think that people are really holding on to what's happened over the last 5 years because COVID fucked us up.
Yeah.
And everything became magnified. But if you really look at the 5 years before that and the 5 years before that, which I would put right around Napster. But before that, it was 10 other things. And so I think that's the trick, right? Is that instead of being like, oh man, the business has changed, like how do you break through? It's like, well, we do that every 5 years. And right now we're on the precipice of obviously AI. And for once, I think we're actually handling it okay. Collectively, I give us a little bit of a pat on the back because our initial reaction for the past 3 revolutions, if you will, is to squash it or sue it. And instead, I think everybody has already used AI in their normal lives and they're like, this is pretty great. Yes, it needs some guardrails for sure, especially in terms of like protecting artists and IP 100%. But instead of being like, well, just we can't have this happen. It's like, it's already happened. And I think our time periods of these revolutions they're going to be coming quicker. And so for me and for you, the fortitude to be able to say, instead of just automatically absorbing that negative, like this is going to kill my business, artists are always going to find a way, no matter what. And I feel so strongly about if you just listen to artists, they will tell you, like they know things that we don't know in their souls. But it's going to be coming faster. It's going to be coming, it's more expensive, So I think in terms of like, yes, the barrier of entry is diminished, but the barrier of quality, it has to remain high. And the people are the barrier. Like they tell us what they want. They tell us, by consuming, they tell us by buying tickets and showing up. And I truly believe that there will be a reaction to the overconsumption, and I look forward to it. I mean, as somebody who makes a large chunk of our digital marketing money off social networks, if, part of that goes away, but P.S., I'm going to be just fine. But I think that's good. I think people getting fed up and deciding that they're going to maybe concentrate on 1 or 2 things, but they're going to go live their life outside of their phones. That's a good thing for all of us.
Yeah. Jenny, as we wind down here, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours, and I hope we can talk again. Talk a little bit about just the process of, you've written this book and now it's out there and people are reading it and it's affecting them in different ways. How did it sort of affect you? I can think of a couple of things that you've sort of mentioned and maybe not mentioned, that, life is fragile. You definitely, folks, need to get those mammograms, ladies. But what are some things that maybe surprised you, this process of putting yourself out there like that? What were some of the lessons you learned?
I think it made me a better marketer. I mean, I think I'd forgotten how raw it feels to put something out in the marketplace and then read feedback on it. And I'm used to it on such a scale with my clients that it's hundreds of thousands of comments and whatever. And it's like it's easy for me to say to my client, don't worry about it. Like, just keep on, like, we have a mission, stay on the mission, but I was truly like, I felt like I was standing naked in front of a bunch of people that were not going, like, I was like, is anyone gonna read this? Is this gonna actually ruin my career? Like, is by putting myself out there, does it also look like I'm not working hard? I mean, all of these swirling thoughts. And the truth is it makes me a better marketer. I also know how to put out a book now.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, it's, I had help and I have my whole office, like doing the marketing, and I have my friends, Cindy and Heather, doing PR. I mean, I was like so lucky to already know the people to help fulfill this dream. But for me, the thought that I kept going back to when I tried to eliminate this 10 times in the process. I mean, I gave up 20 times. I said, fuck this. I want to throw it in the trash. This is awful. What was I thinking? All of those things. But then I remembered that Jay Frank is gone, and Stu Sobel is gone, and Dave Goldberg is gone, and Lisa Lee is gone, and Fran Galante is gone, and all these people that spent so many years, hours, months, weeks, days telling me how to live my life better. And they have kids out there on the planet that I want them to know these stories and be proud. And I want my story to be told because I really hope that other people saw themselves, especially, even though I just don't work in the music business anymore, like, it is always going to be my favorite. And I wanted to tell our collective story about how we used to make it and how we used to do it. Part manual, for what not to do. Like, hey, I already made these mistakes. Let me save you some trouble. But part love letter to what always a generation looks back and thinks that was much simpler time. But the 90s and the early 2000s were not simpler times. And in fact, I found them very parallel to COVID, post-COVID, politically, socially, financially, all of those things. It's just that what we had with social media, everything was so amplified that if we would have had social media in that time period in the 90s and Y2K, I mean, imagine, right? Like, I just wanted to remind people that it's not any more complicated than it was, and it feels like it, and it probably is on some level, but on some levels it's not. So it's like it is going to balance out eventually, I hope.
Yeah, Jenny, it's been so great talking with you. Continued success. Where can people learn more about you, your company, the book? Where can people learn more?
Everything at Girlillamarketing.com, including a blog that I really try to keep up with and send more timelier updates on what's happening and try to share tips and tricks as I learn them. But thank you for everything. I mean, I read my newsletter every day, and I'm so blessed to be here, and it was so much fun talking to you.
Great. Let's talk again. Thank you, Jenny.
Bye.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.